Chapter 19 of Gladiatory Dancing. Neither must I here omit to tell ye that there are many other sorts of dancing, the greatest part whereof are laid aside, others still in use, for example, dancing in arms, proper only to gladiators and soldiers, a tragical invention to kill the innocents in sport, making it a great infamy for a man to receive his death's wound for want of agility. A hateful invention, folly and impiety mixed together, and indeed all sorts of dancing, as they are full of vanity and shamefulness, are not only to be dispraised, but utterly abominated, seeing they teach nothing but a wonderful mystery, how to run mad. Chapter 20 of Stage Dancing. Stage dancing was designed for imitation and demonstration, whereby to explain things conceived in the mind by the gestures of the body, so clearly and perspiciously representing manners and affections that the spectator shall understand the player by the motion of his body, though he say not a word. So far, the excellency of this art appears that without the help of an interpreter, while the actors by motion represent an old man, a young man, a woman, a servant, a drunkard, an angry person, or of any other condition or affection whatsoever, the spectator at a distance, hearing nothing of the story, shall be able to understand the subject of the play. This brought stage players into great request, as Macrobius witnesseth, so that Cicero was wont to contend with Roscius, who was also very intimate with Sylla the dictator, who should plainest and soonest and with most variety express the same sentence, whether the one by gesticulation or the other in set language, which encouraged Roscius to write a treatise wherein he compares a stage motion or action with eloquence. But the Massalensis, great preservers of serious gravity, would not endure a stage player among them, for that most of their arguments, consisting in the repetition of rapes and adulteries, they thought the often seeing thereof would accustom men to the practice of such things. In fine, it is not only a dishonest and wicked calling to exercise stage playing, but also a matter of great dishonor to behold them. For the pleasure of lascivious minds often degenerates into wickedness, so that of old there was no name so ignominious as that of a stage player, who by the laws was made incapable of all honor and honorable society. Chapter 21 of Rhetoricism. There was also a rhetorical gesticulation not much differing from stage action, but more careless, which Socrates, Plato, Cicero, Quintilian, and most of the Stoics have deemed most necessary and commendable in a rhetorician. And an orator is teaching a graceful gesture of the body and composure of the countenance, seeing that the vigor of the eye, the sound of the voice, accommodated to the signification of words and sentences, together with the decent motion of the body and management of the countenance, add much to the force and efficacy of oration. But this histrionical, rhetorical gesticulation began at length to be little used, while Tiberius admonishes Augustus that he should speak with his mouth and not with his fingers, is now quite laid aside, unless it be among some mimic friars, whom you shall see nowadays with a strange labor of the voice, making 1,000 faces, looking with their eyes like men distracted, throwing their arms about, dancing with their feet, lasciviously shaking their loins, with 1,000 sundry sorts of wreathings, restings, turning this way and that way of the whole body, proclaiming in their pulpits their frothy declamations to the people. Mindful perhaps of that answer of Demosthenes reported in Valerius Maximus, who being asked what was most efficacious in speaking, replied, hypocrisy and counterfeiting, and, being asked over and over again, still made the same answer as before, testifying thereby that the whole force of persuasion lay therein. But that we may not digress too far from the mathematics, let us return to geometry. Chapter 22 of Geometry. This is that geometry which Philo the Jew calls the principal and mother of all arts, and has this excellency above the rest, that whereas there are manifold contentions among the professors of all other arts, the masters of this science generally agree in their problems. Neither is there any great matter of debate among them, but only as to points, lines, and superficies, whether they be divisible or no. But they differ not from one another in doctrine or tradition. Only everyone strives to excel the other in the invention of new subtleties, and in making additions to what is already found out. Yet there is no geometrician that could ever find out the right quadrature of a circle, or the line truly equal to the side. Though Archimedes of Syracuse, and after him many even to our own times, pretended to have found the same out, this we may say, that there are very few or none that do acquiesce in the traditions and axioms of their professors, and therefore, while they go about to be still adding something which their masters left imperfect, they run themselves into such an extremity of madness, which all the hellebore in the world is not able to purge away. To this geometry, which instructs us in lineaments, forms, intervals, magnitudes, bodies, dimensions, and weights, belongs to the art of making all mechanic engines and instruments appertaining to the mechanic arts, all engines of war and architecture as battering rams, tortoises, catapults, scaling ladders, moving towers, ships, galleys, bridges, carts, carriages, wheels, bars, together with all those engines by which great and massy weights are moved and lifted up with little help and much care. Besides these, all those pieces of art that move by the assistance of weight, wind, water, ropes, or lines, as clocks, hydraulic organs. By this art, Mercury is said to have made certain idols among the Egyptians, that made an articulate noise with their tongues and could walk several paces. Artitus the Tarentine is also said to have made a dove for exactly by rules of geometry, that the figure would move and fly of itself, and Archimedes is said to have made a brazen heaven in such sort, that it showed all the motions of the planets and spheres, the like whereof we have seen brought to pass in our time. From this art also proceed the several varieties of guns and fire-vomiting engines, of which lately myself have written a special treatise entitled Pyrography, which I now repent me to have done, feeling that it only teaches a most pernicious and destructive art. Lastly, painting, measuring of land, agriculture, founders, statuaries, smiths, carpenters, and all that make it use of wood or metals, all borrow their experience from geometry. Chapter 23. of optic and perspective. Nearest akin to geometry is the art of perspective. Now, perspective is an art that teaches a threefold way of seeing direct, reflexed, and broken, as also the difference of light, shadows, and spaces, how visibles appear through false intervals, how the beams of the sun are received through one or more perspicuous bodies, and how they play upon several figures of bodies, the several accidents of object, sight, and medium, and how the object and the sight are affected according to the variety of the medium. Now, as concerning the reason of seeing, there are sundry and different opinions. Plato thinks that the sight proceeds from an equal clearness of the eye, and the object, the clearness from the eye, being caused by the flowing of light to one extrinsic air, that which proceeds from the body being caused by a reverberation of sight to the eye, the middle clearness about the air being easily fluid and apt to receive shape according to the force of the sight that always extends itself in a fiery form. Galen agrees with Plato, but Hipparchus saith that the beams extended from the eyes to the bodies themselves, touching them as it were with a certain palpitation, returns back the apprehension thereof to the sight. Aristotle is of opinion that the images of things pass from the object to the sight according to their quality, through the alteration of the middle air. Porphyrius believes neither beams nor images, nor anything else to be the cause of sight, but that the soul knowing herself to be the cause of sight, the soul knowing herself apprehends and sees her own self in all visible beings. But the geometricians and optics, coming near to Hipparchus, have invented certain cones made by the coincidence of falling together of the beams through the eyes, so that the eye apprehends many visibles at one time, but those most certainly where the beams meet together. But Alkindus teaches another thing, which St. Austin thinks to be most true, that the power of the soul doth act something in the eye, which is above human wisdom to find out. This art, therefore, much conduces to the understanding of the variety of celestial bodies, their distance, magnitude, motions, and reflections, and is also a great help to agriculture, to architecture, in the measuring, adorning, and perfecting great buildings. But in the art of painting and making landscapes is of so great use that neither can be done without it, for it shows us how to make figures seem undeformed, and in symmetry, at whatsoever height or difference they are to be seen, or distance they are to be seen. Chapter 24 of Painting. Painting is a wonderful art, imitating the shapes of natural things by an accurate description of the lineaments and apt choice of colors. This was once in such high esteem that it was accounted the chief of all the liberal sciences, not less liberal than poetry, in the opinion of Horace. Painters and poets have free leave with equal power to dare and deceive. For painting is nothing else but mute poetry, and poetry of a speaking picture, so near akin they be to each other. For as poets, so painters feign histories and fables, and representation of all things, expressing and figuring light, splendor, shades, heights, and depths. This, moreover, it borrows from optics to deceive the sight, and in one picture the situation being varied to represent various shapes to the sight. And what the statuary cannot reach, this attains to. It represents in lively colors fire, beams, light, thunder, lightning, evening, morning, dawn, clouds, passions of men, the senses of the mind, and even almost the voice itself. And by falsifying measures and dimension, makes these appear to be which are not, and those things which are not to appear to be. As it is related of Zeuxis and Parabasus, painters who contending both for excellency, the first showed painted grapes, so like that the birds flew to feed upon them. The other showed a coverlet, only painted, which was so rarely done that when the first went to put it aside, that he might see the workmanship that it was under, and found his error, he was forced to yield the victory to the latter, whereas he had only deceived the birds. But Parasis an artist, and Pliny relates that in the plays of Claudius there was such excellent painting that the crows have flown to the representation of tiles, mistaking them for the tops of houses. And the same Pliny relates how it had been found by experience that the singing of birds has been scented by the flight of a painted dragon. This, moreover, is always attributed to painting, that in all her works there is more to be understood and judged of than is to be seen, as Plutarch has diligently found out in his icons, so that though the art be extraordinary, yet the ingenuity thereof is beyond the art. Chapter 25 of Statuary and Plastic. Painting is accompanied with the arts statuary, plastic, casting, and engraving, the inventions of laborious wit, which may notwithstanding be all comprehended in architecture. The statuary makes the likeness of things either in stone, wood, or ivory. The plaster performs the same in earth. The like images the caster performs by casting melted brass and other metals in molds. The graver expresses the same things in stones and gems, of all which Pomponius Gauricus among the modern writers has chiefly treated. But all these arts, together with painting, were merely invented by the devil for the nourishment of pride, lust, and superstition. The authors were those who first, according to the words of St. Paul, changed the glory of the incorruptible God into the likeness of corruptible man, of birds, of beasts, and of serpents. The first, who, contrary to divine command that forbids the graven image or the likeness of anything either in heaven above or on the earth below, introduced idolatry, so detested of God, of whom the wise man saith, the idol is cursed. And be that made the same, together with the thing made, shall suffer torment. For the vanity of man, as the same author saith, invented these arts to tempt the soul of man and to deceive the ignorant. And the invention of itself is the corruption of life. However, we Christians, above all other people, are so mad and carried so headlong into this corruption of life and manners, that in all our courts, houses, and chambers, we are not ashamed to keep and admire these wicked ornaments, thereby to invite women and virgins to wantonness with the sight of obscene pictures. Nay, we flick not to introduce them into our very temples, chapels, and over our altars, to the great hazard of breeding idolatry. But of this more when we come to treat of religion. Now that there is a certain authority not to be condemned in statues and pictures, I learned not long ago in Italy, where there happening a very great debate before the Pope between the Austin friars and the regular canons, about the habit of St. Austin. That is to say, whether he wore bless me. That is to say, whether he wore a black stole over a white veil or a white stole over a black veil, and finding nothing in Scripture that gave light toward the determination of the question, the judges at length thought fit to refer the whole matter to paintings and statuaries, resolving to give judgment according to what they should declare they had seen in ancient pictures and statues. Confirmed by this example, I find myself laboring with indefatigable diligence to find out the original of the monk's cowl, and not finding any that might resolve the doubt in Scripture, at length I referred myself to the painters, seeking the truth of the matter in the porches of halls of the monasteries, where the histories of the Old and New Testament are generally painted. Now, feeling that I could not perceive in all the Old Testament neither any of the priests or prophets, no, not Elias himself, whom the Carmelites make their patron, I went and diligently viewed all the New Testament. There I saw Zacharias, Simeon, John Baptist, Joseph Christ, the apostles, disciples, scribes, Pharisees, high priests, Annas, Caiaphas, Herod, Pilate, and many others, but yet I could not see one cowl among them. All till at length examining the whole story over and over again, and by, in the very front of the piece, I found the devil himself with a cowl, as he stood tempting Christ in the wilderness. I was very glad to find that in a picture, that I could observe in no writing that the devil was the first inventor of cowls, from whom I am apt to believe the monks and friars have borrowed the same, though wearing it of divers colors, if they do not absolutely claim it by inheritance. Chapter 26 of Perspective and Looking Glasses. Perspective and looking glasses, ladies and gentlemen. To return to optics, to which the use of looking glasses and perspective glasses does mainly conduce, the experiments whereof are daily seen in the various kinds of glasses, hollow, convex, plane, pillar-fashioned, pyramidal, globular, gibbose, orbicular, full of angles, inverted, everted, regular, irregular, solid, and perspicuous. So we read, as Celius in his ancient readings relates, that one Hostius, a person of an obscene life, made a fort of glasses that made the object seem far greater than it was, so that one finger should seem to exceed the whole arm, both in bigness and thickness. There is also a sort of glass wherein a man may see the image of another man, but not his own, and another which being set in such a posture and place gives back no representation, but the posture being altered, presently returns the object presented. Some that show all sorts of representations, some not all but many. Other glasses there are that, contrary to the fashion of all others, will show the right hand directly opposite to the left, and the left directly opposite. The right hand directly opposite to the right, and the left directly opposite to the left. Other glasses there are that do not represent the image within, but as it were hanging in the air. Burning glasses there are too, that collecting the beams of the sun into one point kindle fire at a distance upon any combustible matter. Little perspicuous glasses also are not without their impostures, that is to say, to make a little thing appear great, those that are afar off, near, those things or places that are near, afar off, those that are above us, below us, those things that are below us, above us, or any other posture or situation whatever. There are other of these glasses that make one object appear to be many, and will represent things with diverse colors like the rainbow, as also in diverse shapes and figures. And I myself have learnt to make glasses, wherein the sun shines. You may discern for distance of 3 or 4 miles together, whatever places are enlightened or overspread with his beams. And this oh, for fork's sake. Now then. La-di-da-di-da. And this is to be admired in plain glasses, that by how much the less they are, so much less than themselves they will represent the object. But let them be, never too big, yet shall they not represent the object ever a whit the larger? Which when St. Austin considered, writing to Nebridius, he conceives it to be something of an occult mystery. However, they are only vain and useless things, invented only for ostentation and idle pleasure. Many, both Greek and Latin, have treated of looking glasses and perspectives, but above all the rest, Vitellius. Thank you for letting me read to you. Please check the description for where to buy my art, where to watch my movie, and where to send me a one-time donation, and I will see you tomorrow.